We put a lot of energy into so many things, and we have a delusional idea that the relationship should just be on autopilot or work for us or give to us without us really approaching it from we need to give to it. This idea that we think that we're a consumer in the relationship, that we think we're supposed to get something, and sort of that what are you doing for me lately mentality, and not working on looking within to see where is it that I am not growing myself or fulfilled in myself. We don't really appreciate to the extent of personal accountability we need to have in order to create what we're looking for. Still, the key is the accountability we have and the opportunity that presents for growth. And so we really need support and help to do the opposite of what we feel like doing and really start introspecting first. What is this reminding me of that I know is my growth area to begin with? And so...
Dr. Rachel, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are doing something super cool because you have a career that has centered in and around relationships, marriages, helping people in general, and you're ready to take it to the next level. Tell me about what your next chapter is looking like, and maybe just help the audience understand what got you here.
So I'll start with what got me here. I am someone who believes that you experience things as you need to in order to help you move to your next level of both what you're here to share with the world and then also your own fulfillment. So what has started me to be writing this relationship book and wanting to help people, I actually knew that from a very young age about needing to help end the suffering in the world. But the relationship motivation and inspiration came from problems I was having in my own marriage. And I was shocked because I knew this was the person I wanted to marry. I was more sure about him than anything else in my life. And a couple years in, I started feeling this emptiness and we were getting stuck. And I was shocked. I just really was deluding myself to think that everything would be perfect once I married my husband. So it really started with a challenge, sort of was a breakdown, but a break open that I can't just go on autopilot. I had to start really reflecting within and being more authentic and true to myself. And I remember doing a pie chart of what makes life meaningful and fulfilling and trying to figure out what are the components. And it was beginning of really what I would call soul searching. And as I have, bumped and explored and discovered and gone up and then down and up and then down, finding different things, then it's in equal measure is my desire to help share that and use that for helping other people going through the same thing.
That's great. It's interesting because, the soul searching is really where the life model for me came from. And it came from the fact that life is always imbalanced. And so I identified the 4 components of life where I was putting my energy and where I wasn't. And I started with love because love is one of the most important things. It's the people you love the most, the who's in our life. And for me, it starts with my wife and my children, right? So I think what's interesting is what you realize is sometimes the things that you love the most are not where you're putting the most energy or you're not putting the most time. And having a better understanding of those relationships are really, really valuable. Another thing that I resonated as I was reading your story is I talk a lot about ROM on this show. And ROM is what my wife and I call rekindle our marriage. And when our youngest son was 2 years old, we had this moment where I thought I was doing everything right. And I was taking my oldest son everywhere and giving her space and letting her bond with the new baby. And I was really taking away, as she said, all the fun parts because, there's so much, you think that you're doing the right thing and we were missing each other. And so we go on this trip and we're on this boat and we're going across, and our listeners have heard this. So if you've heard it, I'm sorry. But we're going across to Tortola to go get on a catamaran. And my wife goes, this is our ROM weekend. It's rekindle our marriage. And what we realized was this is something we started to do all the time on the regular. And so your journey and your mission so resonates with me and I know our audience because what you're doing is helping to put down your best ideas, helping to see from what you've learned. What's some of the stuff that people can look for when they pick up this book in February, because everyone's going to want it? What are some things that you're teaching in this book to help them have a sustainable, exciting marriage?
Well, I want to start with what you just shared. I love this, Rom. This is amazing because like I think the first idea is that we put a lot of energy into so many things, and we have a delusional idea that the relationship should just be on autopilot or work for us or give to us without us really approaching it from we need to give to it. And so I have 4 pillars that run through the book. And so you can kind of assess where you are in your relationship in a way that helps to organize it a bit because it's so many, can feel very overwhelming. Where do we even begin? And then it kind of offers like a roadmap. And what you were speaking about reminded me of pillar 3, which is priority. And especially once you have children, there's so many things that become a wedge or a triangle that gets in the way of our connection. And it's a foundation for everything in our lives other than our, first and foremost, our relationship with ourselves. So what people can get in the book is to kind of get an assessment first and foremost of where are we and where are the pain points in my relationship. And naming those can really give us a lot of power and control to know at least what we're dealing with. And then from there, what are some of the components from amidst these 4 pillars that we can start building and creating and healing to start getting not only heal where you've had issues, but really it should be never ending in terms of the fulfillment. It should be ever growing.
Isn't
We're
it?
really doing it as it's intended.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how I always feel that what you don't realize when you go into a long-term relationship or marriage, like, I've been married 23 years and you don't realize that there are cycles or seasons. And
Mhm.
each season or cycle is different. There's even sometimes cycles within the year that you're in. We both of our boys live away now, and one is still under 18, but he plays for a soccer academy. So it's a unique stress on the family that creates a new environment. But when they both come into the house, we have this new rhythm now as empty nesters that
Mhm.
we have this normal rhythm that we've gotten into, and then they come into the house for the month of Christmas and everything changes. And so it's a completely different dynamic. You go from being the most important person, the only person, to being the least important person as the husband. And it's natural and normal as well, but I think it's interesting because you have to constantly be working at this. This isn't something that just all of a sudden you wake up, you figure it out, and you've got it forever, right?
Exactly. And that's what keeps it creative and fresh is that it is ever evolving. But it catches us off guard often. And it's family dynamic. So we are family. So it is, and that's one of my most favorite topics these days too, is talking about that transition to being an empty nest couple and how to both enjoy it and embrace it and how to handle that transition, but how to prepare for it. Because in my counseling practice, I see couples who are in trouble because they really leaned on the kids so much as a basis for what brought them together that they're really, kind of fumbling with how to connect.
What's interesting to me, and I'm interested in your professional opinion of what you see, but what's interesting to me is the switch and change of such a female dominated family dynamic today versus what I grew up with and so many other families. I think of the Gen X and back really came from that different vibe where, there was mom was always extremely important, but today mom kind of sets so many boundaries in the modern families that are uniquely different. And
Hmm.
we go over to friends' houses and we're in our 40s, and we'll be with friends that have kids that are 2 and 4, and our kids are, grown. And so there's a different dynamic. There's a pace of life, there's an understanding, there's better response time. So there's lots of positives, by the way, and it's also just different. And I'm interested in how that's affecting the empty nesting, because the kids have become the center point in such a major way for so many of the new families.
Yeah.
I'm interested how you're seeing that, and if there's a dynamic that's working to help them maybe reattach and reconnect.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. It's fascinating how the trends really impact our personal lives very intimately. And the child-centeredness started in the 60s with like social psychology and understanding child development. And then it's really become very intense now with very child-centered. And so that a lot of the things that are in my book are actually counterintuitive. My husband and I study the wisdom of Kabbalah, and that was the beginning of understanding paradox and understanding things that are counterintuitive. And this is one of them. Like, it is wonderful, all the child centeredness that's happening, and being able to show empathy and have more tools for how to not communicate to children in a way that disempowers them, and setting boundaries that also blend love. And nonetheless, there still is a growing, I think, overemphasis on the children. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to benefit them to not focus on them so much. Actually, it is to their benefit for the couple to make sure they are the center point relationship. And that's very counterintuitive, especially for women. At least I'd found that with my own husband, that he still was oriented more toward me, and I directed my nurturing energy toward the kids. And that was one of our kind of breakdowns that became a breakthrough for us. And that's pillar 3, priority, was his. He's the one who added that. I had 3 pillars, and he added that one. It was when I really made the switch and stopped over focusing on our kids and made him more of a priority, that he felt better about himself in the relationship. But I find it's always going against the natural inclination to make sure I'm pausing and being deliberate and intentional, and to make sure that even when my kids who are now grown and I have a grandson, that I have to make sure that I don't completely ignore my husband or drop everything once the kids come back or they're around, and making decisions that really show and live, not just show, but really live in truth in my heart, the value that he is to me, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I think it is counterintuitive, and the more challenging, I grew up where when I started to have children, my wife and I were in this generation where everything was equal. Like, I was handling the evening feeding. And by the way, it was never equal. I want that to be very clear. I was never truly equal, but the mentality was to create equality within the relationship, right? And so I would do the evening feeding, then she would sleep, she'd go to bed earlier, then I would do the feeding in the morning, not first thing in the morning, but the second one, and then I'd take them to the sitters. And my dad didn't do any of those things. So like, I woke up and I was doing things that I had never seen modeled. Which is very challenging in a relationship, because you're almost like, oh, I thought I was just supposed to go work, and I thought I was supposed to produce, and I thought I was supposed to protect, and the roles changed. And you know what, the cool part, and where I was getting to that, was you go through this life, and you realize that I'm much closer to my children than I grew up with my dad, and even my mom too. We have this unit. So there's a lot of positives.
Mhm.
And so even dad, who usually would be like, hey, mom's number one, then the kids, even dad likes having the kids around a lot more than what it
Mm.
was like previously in my childhood. And I think it's just really interesting. So one of the things I would do is, I used to, when we would go on soccer trips, for example, as long as we could afford it, I would try to book 2 rooms and put the kids in one room and us in a room. If we got a vacation, I would try to do something where, there was a clear delineation of usage of bathrooms, and simple little things that allowed us to have some level of privacy and separation from them, because even those tiny things would allow us to have a better time together. Like, I needed that reset without the kids, but I also wanted them around. And so it's a difficult world to be in. So I think it's cool that your husband put in the priority, because you probably have always been his number one priority. In his brain, he ranks you as number one, and the kids maybe next.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Which, isn't it a modeling, though, that's also important for relationships in their lives? So to your point with kids, how important is it for them to see a healthy relationship of their parents, so they know what healthy relationships actually look like?
Yes. And that is where it's counterintuitive and it's beyond just what we see. In some level, it is because of modeling. My husband and I were just having a conversation last Sunday about something that is a recurring theme in our, we've been married 36 years, and it's a recurring theme that, and it's in part because of what you're saying, how the roles are changing. And, my husband was born in the 50s, I was born in the 60s. And so we have internalized these roles, and yet I'm younger than him. So I think I also have um, pushed forward the roles, although he's very progressive. But there's still things unconsciously that he was coming to awareness about, that he was thinking that's all he needed to do. Because like you just said, I'm doing what my father did. And he's not maybe realizing he's doing that, but with some reflection, he realized that. And so it's also important to be patient with each other, because we are, we sometimes expect of each other things that are really unrealistic, considering the rate of change and kind of the roots from where we come. And so our goal and what we were working on together on that Sunday was not to come a complete overhaul, but how can we make some headway in some things that have been internalized as him seeming to feel that that's normal, and how can he start to pick up on some of the things that now probably modern men would do more of. And but I think that the you said something in your for life, the E, the energy. And this is where I think the children, they benefit by what they watch, but they also benefit energetically in a way we can't see. And there is they came from us, and we are their root. And so they came from our love together and our joining and our oneness. So when we keep prioritizing that, they still feed and receive from that energy in a way that we can't necessarily see. And it reflects in the physical, but it really starts with something more spiritual that is happening. And that takes more faith, because we're so oriented toward, if I see it, I believe it. And it can feel like you're disappointing your children if you go out on a date when, you're really busy. But sometimes make sure, of course, you spend time with your children, but they can handle it. I used to tell our kids, Mom and Dad, this is really good for us and for you, that we're, doing a ROM, as you would say.
Yeah.
I didn't say it like that. But so, yeah, that's where it really is truly beneficial for the children, to make sure you're prioritizing your relationship.
Well, I look back and I'm a pretty strong personality, and I'm very intense, and I'm an entrepreneur from the very beginning. And I think that when you have that really powerful energy, when it's used for great things, it's really, really special. But I remember growing up and applying a lot of pressure to my mom to be around more, or why does she want to do that? Or, and then I had my oldest son, who is very strong energy. And we've never been on a vacation or a trip where my son is like, hey, I hope you're having a great time. Like, it was never like that growing up. I mean, he would be like 4 years old, 3 years old, and he would be grumpy that we were gone. And he loved being around us. It's not a negative, but he really also liked having mom around. And so we had to press through some of those things where we knew it would be something that would not be fun for the kids when we announced we were going on a ROM, right? It's not about them. It's about us. And by prioritizing ourselves, they were seeing that we love each other, that we're putting each other first, that we're teaching them that it's okay. And it's also okay for parents to remember that the kids have to know they're not always number one. Like, life is not like that for them. When they come to, and we employ them, and they're like, what do you mean my opinion's not the most important opinion in the world? You're like, it's a lot better if your parents taught you that than if we have to teach it to you. It's way easier.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you start little by little, start teaching them to think outside of themselves and thinking for the sake of others. Oh, mom and dad are people. They actually need time too. They want to be happy. And so I'm actually adding value to the family because I am being supportive. And well, even if they're complaining about it, eventually they might start to see that they you could even explain that when you complain about it, it really drains us and it makes us harder for have a good time. And appreciate your courage to, or strength to, help, depending on their age, be a good, strong boy or strong girl, and support us to go. And I work also with estrangements is another specialty of mine, where adult children are estranging from their parents more than usual, more than it has in the past.
Hmm.
And one of the things I'm noticing, this is just kind of what I'm sensing or intuiting, is that the parents who over focused on the children's needs being um, overriding the parents, that the children who, when they become adults, they don't really know how to cope as well when maybe the parents are doing something that the kids don't like. So they're more likely to, have a really black and white and be impatient with it. And they feel kind of entitled to have it the way it's supposed to be, centered around me and what I need for my wedding, or not, or whatever it is, and
Right.
not be somewhat thoughtful to, well, how can I present that to my parents that's thoughtful to them? And so you really teach them how to be a team player um, in your family by prioritizing your marriage.
It's really interesting to me because the very things that you're talking about are things that are naturally going to happen. If we provide a life that's better for our children, they're oftentimes more educated. They're oftentimes in a better position. So they do want to help you and lead you because it's natural as your parents age. They definitely want to do that. And I think there is this gap of timeline where, there is a time where you have to almost take over for your parents. We're not there yet, but we're close in some ways, where as our parents age, there are things we have to do for them that we've never had to do for them. And that takes a little bit of challenge for them because, it's not easy to give up some of that. But it's just a constant growth. It's constant growing from everybody, the relationship within you and your spouse, the relationship of you and your children. And there are times where you have to put your foot down. And I tried to get my parents wanted to do some remodeling in their house. And I'm literally, I go in, I'm like, okay, let's do this. Let's fix this. Let's get that. Like, I'm changing everything because that's what I do. I want to fix it for them. And so my mom goes, well, this is the price for the house. This is the price for the paint. And I'm like, well, let's just paint the whole house. Well, my dad decided he didn't want 2 of the rooms painted, but we had already kind of gotten the entire house. I already paid for it to be painted, but he decided he didn't want these rooms painted. And I'll be honest, this is like a couple years ago. It was challenging to me because I'm like, hey, I'm doing this for you. I want to help you. And but I'm not the main character in the story. It's not my story. And it's still hard to step back and realize that this is their life, their house, their marriage, their choices, regardless of even who's doing it. But I'm sharing that just simply because it's a natural moment where I was assuming a leadership role, and my dad politely showed me where the line was. And it might have just been hey, I'm going to do this just because I can. Or it might have been because he just didn't feel like it was necessary and he didn't want to do it. And both of them are okay because it's his house. And so, but I can tell you in the moment, I was very frustrated as I
Well,
was like, I just want to get it
yeah,
all done.
yeah. So, and I may ask you if it's okay, like how did you see that upon reflection as a growth opportunity for you? What was happening in that interaction that may have helped you see your own opportunity for evolving and growing?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think ultimately is that sometimes we get so caught up in our vision and winning that we're not thinking about the other people that are attached to the objective. So for me, giving my parents something is special, but it's also, I had to take it from what it was, which is giving of something to them, to not my version or vision of that. And so, that is very difficult for me. I still want to walk in the house every single time I'm there and change everything to help them, like to provide a better experience. I've been very blessed. I want to share. And I've pulled back a lot in a lot of ways over the years because I felt a need to share in a very, very heavy way. And it wasn't guilty. It was honored. It was blessed. It was just, how am I? I'm here where I'm at because of these things. And when I look back at my childhood, it's really interesting because my mom, I was the oldest grandson in an Italian Catholic family. So my grandmother had 7 children, my mom being one of the 6 girls, and then my uncle. And what's really interesting about that is I grew up with a lot of female attention. They were all teenagers, they were all growing up. There was so much attention, so much challenge. And there were times where my dad would discipline me and, everybody was against him, but he would stand up for what he believed was right, or he would do it. And I look back on my life, and just the nurturing I received from them was amazing. The love, the confidence, but the check that I received from my father when I needed it, because you can become entitled and enabled very quickly, is such a blessing. So when I'm giving, to pull it for full circle, I'm giving because I love them, I'm honored, I feel blessed, but I have to remember that's why I'm doing it, not just to do the vision that I've seen. And that's
Yeah.
kind of it's a long answer, but it's something I think I've thought about a
Oh,
lot.
that's beautiful. Yeah. And that's where um, I hope to communicate. I hope to live this and really work to live this, that every interaction, especially the challenging ones, are really an opportunity to keep hewing and to keep honing who we are, to become, work on that ego you mentioned. I think before we started, we talked about that a little bit too. We all have one, and it's essential, a driver as part of who we are, but makes us think of our needs and what we want. And so, even in giving, there's some agenda that can be attached that actually it's sneaky. That ego force is very stealth and can come in. And it was in that case, I would see it as you were identifying where you were making it about you, and then you resisted the inclination and you let go and you made room to really just truly give in a way that's going to be what they want without your own agenda.
Yeah,
And
after, of course, I told my mom how ridiculous it was. I mean, let's be honest. This is an authentic show. I'm not going to lie. My mom's listening to this probably right now, and she's going to text me and say, "I really love this part when you." But the truth is, I definitely made it known that I didn't agree. But at the same time, you back off and you
yeah.
realize it. And of course, I never would bring it up to my dad, because
Mhm.
that's crossing the line. So it you just this dynamic of relationships is always growing. What
Mm.
you're talking about in marriage, what you're talking about in parenting, it's both sides, the child, the parent, the
Mm.
husband, the wife. And we go through all different seasons like we were talking about, and it takes time. The very things that probably that you fell in love with your husband about are the very things that sometimes you get the most frustrated about. You
Mhm.
know, for me, it may be that I'm very confident. I like to lead. I have no problem making decisions. And that's probably very attractive when you're young. And then as you get older, maybe that's not as attractive. When
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? Like, there are things that I have to make sure I'm deferring on sometimes,
mhm.
because otherwise it's too dominant. And
Mhm.
so these
Mhm.
are all growth opportunities for all of us.
Yes, yes, and that's the second pillar of the book, and which brings most people to come see me for counseling, is they're having trouble with the growth pillar, and that's where the conflict happens. And they're having trouble with how things are ever evolving and changing, and they don't know how to navigate how the needs are changing, how they're evolving because the society's evolving, or they're coming into their own, or and so the growth, without really embracing the growth and seeing your relationship and the conflict you're facing through that lens, then it really is so limiting to and causes more disconnection when it actually is the opposite, counterintuitive again. It's there to actually bring you closer, to help you grow more for who you're capable of becoming. And then the love grows more profoundly as you become, through the relationship, more of who you feel proud to be.
And isn't it crazy how counterintuitive it is to think about so many people when they're trying to make their relationship better are looking to the other person, and really it's the self-awareness, it's the understanding of who we are and what we're doing and how we're receiving that information, even if we know how you receive it as our partner, and I don't like it, because that's very normal. You don't like the way you receive it, right? And so you're still going to give it your way, or you can adapt and you can
Mhm.
try to adjust it and you can create a different messaging. But so often it's that self-awareness that we lack. And the older we get, I'm so grateful to, continue to be growing and learning, and it's always something that you're working on. I mean, you could have a perfect week, and then one day you're like all of a sudden
Yep.
completely disconnected, and
Yep.
you're like, what is going on?
Yep.
And it takes that self-awareness to understand what can I do? What can I control?
Mhm.
And now once you've exhausted all those things and it's not working, then you have to have a sit down. You have to say, listen, I've tried all these things. I need some help here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's amazing.
What do you see as the single biggest killer in relationships? Like, what is the thing that over the 30 plus year career that you've had, what has been the biggest relationship breakdown that is consistently coming to the top? Anything stand out to you?
Well, actually, two things come to mind. So I'll start with the first one. And the first one is this idea that we think that we're a consumer in the relationship, that we think we're supposed to get something, and sort of that, what are you doing for me lately mentality, and not working on looking within to see where is it that I am not growing myself or fulfilled in myself. And and I think the not taking responsibility, which is pillar one. The first pillar is we're each responsible for our own happiness and well-being. And I think that one is, um, we might hear little bits of that kind of wisdom, but we don't really appreciate to the extent of personal accountability we need to have in order to create what we're looking for. And then the second thing I think is really lack of appreciation. And it's just human nature that we take for granted what we have. And so I think that it's really like getting to know how the partner feels appreciated most and feel cherished. And I mean, really, and as you asked for one thing, but it's always hard for me to say
No,
one
it's
thing.
okay. You don't have to give me one thing. This is the
Really, my
conversation anyway.
personality is, and that's why I had four pillars, because it just, and there's also just the lack of insight is, and growth. Some people, really struggle with having insight, or they just can't see it. They just only see that they're a victim to something, or that it's something happening to them. And there's always that part of the thinking system that can happen to the most insightful people, where you only can see when you're like emotionally reactive and dysregulated. We only see what it is that our partner is doing that's not right. And that's probably true that they are doing something not right. But still the key is the accountability we have and the opportunity that presents for growth. And so we really need support and help to do the opposite of what we feel like doing, and really start introspecting first. What is this reminding me of that I know is my growth area to begin with? What work can I do on myself that maybe I'm doing something similar that is being mirrored to me through their behavior or their lack of behavior? So I think, a lack of growth mentality and really trusting the process, that whatever challenge is happening, it's for the good, it's for the benefit, to really embrace it so that you can grow.
Yeah, because once you come through on the other end, that's when the growth really does happen. I mean, the biggest challenge is, I feel so blessed because in our marriage, when we've had the biggest challenges, we've definitely come through the other side, and there's been a growth that happens where you build upon it. So it's not something that you're forgetting, but we also don't go back to it either, and what I mean by that is sometimes it has nothing to do with us. Sometimes it's just acknowledging and being self-aware that, let's take empty nesting, for example. It is weird and different when all of a sudden there's no energy in the house. You go from heavy energy with teenage boys and tons of energy happening and games every day, to hearing your silverware hit the plate. Like, that is like the one thing. I sat at the dinner table one night and I heard us, like, we were like clink, clink, clink. And then Adrian gets up immediately and starts like cleaning up the kitchen. I'm like, hey, why don't we sit down for a few minutes, And we're having this conversation, but it's just all new. We're like setting all new standards. But as we get through those things, it really has nothing. It has some stuff to do with us, but it has to do with the change of environment and how the environment affects us. Even work. Some people go through work schedules, right? And their work changes and all of a sudden they're not home as much. How does that impact their partner? And are
Mm-hmm.
they aware of how it's impacting their partner, right? Not just how it impacts them, but how it impacts their partner.
Yeah, absolutely.
With what's your fourth pillar? So we've heard the three. You may have said it already, but what is your fourth pillar, the last pillar?
Yeah. So the first is responsibility for our own happiness and well being. Second is growth. We're here to use our friction to grow individually and closer. Third is priority. We make each other the most important other person in our lives. And the fourth pillar is purpose, is we use our love to make the world a better place.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that the Soulful Marriage and this project for you of writing this book, of putting
Mhm.
everything out for everybody is kind of that last pillar for you. Am I
It
right?
is. It absolutely is. My husband and I, again, from studying the wisdom of Kabbalah, we studied many different spiritualities. We were born Jewish and still, connect with being Jewish, but we were always exploring lots of different spiritualities. And then we found Kabbalah, and it's just really like practical, logical, and spiritual, deep, wisdom. And we were learning how important it is to share, how we really came to give, and that's where true fulfillment is. And so we became more givers in the relationship. We also then started looking for ways that we can give and support each other in giving to the world. And then, with time, maybe it was about 10 years ago, I remember having a conversation over dinner that it was like, why don't we use our relationship to help other couples? And so I'm the therapist, I'm the writer. And so it became clear that I was writing it, but it's really on some level our book. The energy of us is in the book all the way through. I say he's the spine of the book. But it's an example of, and it's not easy. Like, um, being purpose driven takes effort, but it's so much more fulfilling, and it's again counterintuitive. To be happy, we have to also sometimes go against what we feel like doing. And once you cross over and you start getting involved in putting in the effort, then it starts to sing. And so it's helped me individually to have this. When you asked me at the beginning what's like next level, I'm always looking for like, what else can I do? How else can I share? Who else can I reach? And so this one stretched me, like we're here to kind of stretch our vessels, and this one's still stretching me. But the trickle effect, the relationship is really, and I wrote about it in the book, like what I would describe as like a generosity of spirit, is that it becomes contagious. And it's not just about writing a book together, but any way that you can be keeping in your mind. I wonder how, with our time we have together today, especially being empty nesters, but at any time, with whatever time you do have, I wonder how we might be able to bring a meal to someone, or how we might be able to get involved in an organization or doing something that we'll never see directly the benefit from, but we know that it's doing something that's going to add value to someone's life, and kind of almost tithing really of your time and all of your resources. And so then it's like we tag team, and like sometimes he sends something over to me, or I'll send something over to him. You might want this, think it'd be good to talk with this person, or and then you see that side of your partner giving, and then it's, in fact, research has shown that is attractive. That makes you more drawn to a person when they're altruistic and they're generous. So purpose is the best kept secret, is the least spoken about. It's never do people come into my, counseling office saying, as a couple, they're missing purpose. I have individuals feel like they come in missing purpose, but it's really not something that people are aware of, that it really can help take your relationship to a whole new level, to have something bigger than yourself, because it's not just about the two of you. You're tapping into to God. You're tapping into God. Is what you're doing, really.
It's a hidden benefit, because people are being lied to, and they're being lied to because they're being told that they're the most important person. And you just went through an entire purpose conversation, but you started out by saying, I'm the writer and I'm the therapist, but my husband was the spine as we pulled this project together. There's an empowerment that comes from deferring and building with someone versus just making yourself the main character in the story. And it's difficult to do, but the best kept secret, if the best kept secret is purpose, then what I think is so interesting to me is people continue to be lied to make themselves the most important person in the world. If your feelings aren't being met, if he doesn't appreciate you, if you don't show him this, or if he doesn't show her that, like, it's constantly about individualism. And when you're building a book and the next chapter of your life, the power that comes from doing it together, I think we keep seeing too often the depreciation of the relationship, the depreciation of the marriage, the things that people get separated and divorced over today sometimes are so disheartening because they are like normal Wednesdays, and by the way, there are lots of other things that aren't normal Wednesdays, but for the things that are just natural, that when you overcome it together, I watched your, in preparing, I watched your Instagram feed for a little while, and you got your book in the mail, and you said, I'm going to practice something called patience. And it had to kill you, like, to not open that box. But you didn't open the box. You waited for your husband to get there and you opened it together, and you didn't even try to look at it first. You did something that showed not only are what you're putting in this book is something that's going to help people, but you believe it and you're acting upon it. And I think
Mm.
that's really something that's interesting. As I study people and I understand what someone's doing, that's a really interesting dynamic. So purpose was really about both of you. It wasn't just about you.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. I love like I feel like we're bathing in this idea in a way that that really we tend to think that it's about us individualistically, and also that it's only on us, that we have to do it by ourselves, and then we don't make room for higher forces to help us, including, you know, like setting the ego aside. It's a vast abundance that opens up for us, including from our own mate. And we're finding now that like a project like this is leading to other things, and we're finding, and we we really prayed for it. We asked, like, how do you want us to put our what we've been given together to help others? And it still continues to unfold, and now we find that we're working together more than we had before, and we have two very different fields. He's in retail clothing and I'm in, but now he's going to be carrying the book in the stores, and we're doing like relationship events through the stores. And um, so I think once you take a step and you make the decision that you're committed to, and surrender to, how do you want me to make a difference, then you get guided, and it's this quantum effect of doing it together. I think in the post that I said, like, together is better, and that doesn't mean there aren't things I do on my own and he does on his own, no doubt about it. But there is this patience and restricting the urge to just seek the relief or seek the need that I have, and be intentional about what's really going to make it the best experience, which is for us to open it together. And he was out of town and he was going to get home late, and so we discussed it, fortunately, before he left town, so that I probably would have waited anyway. But yeah, thank you for bringing up that story.
Well, as we were talking, it just came to my mind as something that really stood out. And it's also really nice to hear strong, successful women that are praising their spouses and
Um,
talking about the foundation and spine. And my wife and I talk about this a lot with friends that have remained married, that have had successful lives. Look, we all fail, we all make mistakes, we're all challenged, but there's this empowerment that again comes from these relationships when you're building and growing them together. And so, and I think as we experience this empty nesting stage, and my wife was a 22-year elementary education teacher, and she retired now so that we can be more engaged in our younger son's life with him living away, and we go back and forth to kind of be a bigger part, and we have more flexibility and freedom. There's this new search for purpose for both of us
yes.
because it's a change. And so it's something we're experiencing right now. And it's not just about one career or a job where you found, when you're teaching, autistic children in a classroom of inclusion, and you're changing people's lives every day and you're needed, there's a big difference and a change that happens. And so, I have to be mindful of that as well, as we go through this change, but then searching for things together that we can do where it's not just one of us being the head show person.
Mm,
It's
right,
us
right.
together kind of building that is something that I think is really good. And the fourth pillar is a secret. So, because
Cool.
purpose does really build something special for everybody. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and what you're bringing up also reminds me of pillar 1 again, which is we're each responsible for our own happiness and well-being, and that includes our own individual purpose and us really and I see with the empty nest, challenges that some couples have is this very difficult transition because and often it's the women, but it could be either, when there hasn't been, um, a focus that other than the children as their purpose, then they don't feel like equal partners. They don't feel like as valid inside themselves, and so then they put more pressure on the spouse to make them feel like they're respected. And so it really helps to whether it's because you leave, your job as an elementary teacher, or because you leave your job because the kids grow. It's just really important to keep reinventing oneself. And everybody has a different desire. Not everyone wants to achieve at the same level, and that's fine. There's no objective measure of that. But it does having two partners that have a similar desire and feel like they're actualizing themselves takes a lot of pressure off the relationship to try to make you feel fulfilled. And then you
Right.
can appropriate the right amount of energy that a relationship should help you feel fulfilled, not too much of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's unique if you think about it when you both are working and you're both have a schedule and you're both doing something, all of a sudden one of you is working and the
Yeah.
other is home and the kids are gone. There's just a major adjustment period.
Yes.
And so it's been a unique experience and we're learning a lot. And it's something that I'm excited because I think we both agree that purpose is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe we knew the secret, which is a really big benefit. But
Hmm.
we definitely could continue to learn and grow. And I think that's the interesting dynamic. It's always funny. I always love talking with people that are like 5 to 8 years behind you in life,
Mm,
where their kids are at the stage where you're looking back and you're like, oh man, when they were 10 and 13, it felt like we were so busy and we were nowhere near as busy as we were when they were 13 and 16.
mm,
And then you get to the point
yeah.
where like one's away in college and you're looking back and there's this perspective that just has you think about things in a completely different way. And
Mm,
so I think it's beautiful that you're sharing what you've learned, and you're not just sharing what you've learned in your marriage, you're sharing what you've seen in all the people that you are healing and helping really get to that happiness level in their lives and their marriages with themselves, because it's really hard to be loved if we don't love ourselves, right? It's very
yeah,
difficult to do that.
absolutely.
Tell us
Yeah.
about the book, like when it comes out. Give our listeners the chance to, where can they find you? Where can they follow you ahead of time? And how can we get the word out for you?
Great. Thank you. Well, it's February 4th is the release date. I actually just got the copy last night. I forgot to bring it in my office, um, but it'll be in the store starting February 4th, and you can order it on Amazon. You can order it through Barnes and Noble. You can order it through Left Bank Books is a local bookstore here, and I think it's even at through perhaps Walmart. You can find it online if you just look up my name in the book. You can find several. You can actually pre-order it now, and then on my website, drrachelglick.com, I have a section called book, and that's where it shows links of where you can order the book from
Are
there.
you, do you see yourself doing any type of events or retreats or anything in the future? Is there a bigger picture that you and your husband are developing and building?
Well, we have a couple already lined up. So yes, I would like to reach as many people as possible, someone like I can handle it, but I'm doing some, I really like working with entrepreneurs. So I'm doing an event in April for the local St. Louis chapter of Young Presidents Organization for YPO. And so I like working with anyone, but I also like working with entrepreneurs. And that's a larger group. We'll probably make it experiential and workshop oriented. And then I'm also going to be doing some training for other therapists where to teach about what I've learned and how they can maybe incorporate that into their counseling practice. And then I'm interested in doing like small groups too, where we, get an intimate group of couples and you can like really dig in with questions and how you can, take your relationship to the next level. So, and then I do, I write for different magazines like Psychology Today or Mind Body Green, and go on, Fox 2 segments and other television segments, perhaps. So I'm just kind of taking it. I'm scheduled, through maybe April, and then seeing where else I might be able to reach more people.
So pre-order the book now. It comes out February 4th. Get it everywhere. And if you're in the local market, Left Bank Books, is that what it was called? The
Yeah,
local
that's right.
one?
In St. Louis, it's a local bookstore. They're going to have it. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's awesome.
And you can buy it at Glik's, my husband's retail clothing store, gliks.com. I don't know that you can get it on the website, but he has stores in the Midwest. And so you can buy it in one of his stores, actually.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
So another great way to cross pollinate our worlds together, right?
That word. Yeah, cross-pollinate.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Dr. Rachel, it's been a pleasure to have you. We definitely could have talked a lot longer.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being a guest on the show, and I'll look forward to the book coming out here in February.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. Really happy to meet you. I'm very inspired by the way you live your life.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.